Hey, this is Lance Dutson, and welcome to another episode of the Advance Team. We have got a special wrap-up. The Governor LePage just finished his State of the State speech, and we're going to dig in with our panel of experts here to see what they think. With us tonight on the Advance Team is Ben Grant, Peter Gore from the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, Steve Robinson, and again, I'm Lance Dutson. This was a big speech for the governor, maybe one of his most anticipated speeches based on the fact that he's laid out this very ambitious budget that's been the talk of the town. At first glance, I think it's no question that Paul LePage has become a more seasoned politician. I think I've watched every one of these, I think, since he started, and I'll have to say that his delivery is definitely more confident than it's been in a while. Ben Grant, I know you have had some reservations about the budget, but after that performance, are you sold? Do you feel like this that you're finally part of the 38% now?
No, I'm not part of the LePage revolution just yet. Definitely it didn't convince me. Look, this is more a battle at the very high level about philosophy. What do you believe about government and its role with the economy? And Paul LePage believes in cutting the top rate in taxes, and that will lead to greater prosperity. And I think people like myself and people on my side of the aisle just don't believe in that direct one-to-one correlation. I mean, I know we're going to get into a lot of details, but to me, that's where I started. This is really about your philosophy about government and its role in the economy.
Steve Robinson, what are your initial thoughts on this speech?
I think that we knew that the governor coming into this was going to need to defend his budget, so it's no surprise that he devoted a great deal of his speech to defending that budget. I think he made a solid case for it. I was surprised that I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was surprised about how directly and combatively he confronted the Maine Municipal Association. They are one of the groups that pushes for higher taxes, pushes to save revenue sharing and kind of preserve this financial link between municipal governments and the state government. But I think he made a solid defense of his budget. And I mean, our income tax, people, the left wants to use this rhetoric that it's a tax cut for the wealthy, but most low-income people aren't paying income taxes anyways. They're not even paying sales tax if they use an EBT card or if they're on food stamps. So I'm just not buying that this is an income tax for the wealthy few, because I mean, there's not a lot of wealthy people in Maine, and our high income tax rate is an embarrassment nationally. And it's a big signal to people: don't move to Maine because the state's going to take more of your money. And look what do you get in exchange for it? Not a superior quality of services than you get anywhere else in the country.
So Peter Gore, you've seen, I imagine, most of the governor's State of the State speeches. What do you think about his performance tonight overall?
This is something that Ben has talked about, I think, with you, and I know who's usually sitting here, and he and I have talked about it, but this was a populist message he delivered tonight, and I think it's starting a theme that he's already started to talk about in the paper today, which is, I'm going to take this message of lowering income taxes for Maine people to the people. And it was a very different governor who delivered this State of the State address. He was very polished, but more to the point, he was very relaxed in his delivery. He was non-combative. He repeatedly used words like work together. We need to work together to succeed. I'm asking for your help so we can find a way to make Maine people prosper. And it was interesting, I counted. He said prosper or prosperity 9 times in his speech. He used one of those 2 words. That's not a Republican or a Democrat message. That's a populist message. That's a message that everyone believes in. And clearly that's his goal with this budget. And his goal in this speech was to outline that. And he succeeded.
So I agree with you, Peter. I think he was more relaxed than I've seen him in a public speech in a long time. I think he's still he's not probably the greatest orator in American politics, but I think his tone was markedly different, I think, than it has been in the past. Ben Grant, let's talk about a little bit about this budget and kind of the case that the governor made. He's talking about moving Maine from an income tax, which he says you have no say in, to a consumption tax, where essentially you choose how many taxes to pay. And I know Steve Robinson addressed this just a minute ago, but I mean, isn't the basic argument, the toughest sell on this, the regressive nature of this tax? And when you combine that with what the governor seemed to admit in this speech, that income taxes, that property taxes are going to go up, I mean, do you think the governor's done a good enough job selling the idea that this is a reduction in taxes for Maine taxpayers overall?
Well, no, I don't think he's succeeded in that yet, and I think you are right that it's the property tax that's the hidden problem for him right now. I mean, Steve spoke about MMA. MMA doesn't go out there and seek higher taxes for the sake of higher taxes. MMA is out there trying to make sure that municipalities have adequate services, whether that's police, fire, or what have you. And I think a lot of people in Maine, a lot of communities in Maine want to have those adequate services. And I think that's where, at the end of the day, that's where the bill is going to come due, is on the property tax. Look, I'll just finish. I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I mean, every tax is a tax on your income. The question is, are we going to have taxes structured in a way that reflect your ability to pay them or not? And if you move towards a more consumption-based and property tax-based system, you're going to get away from that reflection of ability to pay.
Steve Robinson, taking on the MMA directly like that, I mean, that was a long section of very direct bully pulpit attack on the Maine Municipal Association. You know, I got to say, I've never been a big fan of the MMA, and I think what the governor laid out is there's a lot of truth to it. But what does that do? Does it elevate MMA, or does it kind of coalesce people's attention on the MMA that maybe has operated underneath the radar screen? What's the impact of the bully pulpit attack on the Maine Municipal Association?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on the Maine Municipal the association's ability to come back and defend themselves and engage with the governor. Obviously, they're at this point. You know, the guns are out, the fists are clenched. It's going to be combative. I think that this was something that would have to come about because they're not going to move from their position. We saw during the last budget battle in the 126th legislature, we had the same argument over revenue sharing and property taxes. So it might be, you know, we might see the governor coming back to this in his town halls. I think we'll see him go into town halls and say, listen, they're going to oppose my budget because they want to protect the middleman association. I thought that was a clever turn of phrase. I think he's going to use, like what Peter said, this populist message, and he's going to villainize these people in the same way that Obama villainized health insurance companies in order to get Obamacare passed. I mean, it's worked for the left having a villain, so maybe it'll work for Paula Page.
So, Peter Gore, I want to shift a little bit to one of the lines from the governor's speech where he talked about increasing the taxes on tourists coming up. And I know you've seen over the years we've had this debate kind of over and over again about whether or not it's good for Maine's largest industry, the tourism industry, to try to shift the tax burden onto visitors. Does the business community or does the tourism industry in general think that that their customers are willing to pay more to visit Maine in order to bolster our revenue?
Well, a lot of times when you talk about the tourism industry and tourism taxes, you think about the meals and lodging taxes directly. And in my remembrance of his proposals, he actually flattens that. So some of it actually goes down, if I remember correctly. The difference here is he's expanding the consumption tax onto items that traditionally tourists might use. Ski tickets, golf, those kind of things, or just other consumptive things that tourists might buy when they come to Maine. I really don't know what the impact of that will be, and I'm not a tax guy. I'm not really qualified to do it. I do know that when I travel to another state and I have to buy things, I don't think about what that sales tax is on that item. I don't think on whether that item is going to be taxed at 9% or 11%, or when I check out of my hotel room, I don't know what that the total tax impact is going to be. I suspect that will be somewhat the case here, but I don't know.
Ben Grant, what about that? I mean, it seems to me that if you have the idea that taxing something is a disincentive and reducing taxes on something is an incentive, wouldn't you run into trouble when you try to what I think the governor used the phrase exporting the tax burden? I mean, doesn't that have the potential to dampen visits to Maine, even if it is, as Peter said, that it's a small amount that maybe people don't look ahead? I mean, that's kind of subjective. We talk about the tax issue all the time, and I think traditionally Republicans have used this economic argument that if you tax something that you're disincentivizing it. I mean, where are Democrats on this? Are Democrats going to welcome these expansions of taxes, or are they going to fight it the way Republicans have fought it?
Hard to tell at this point. You know, I'm not a lawmaker, so I'm not exactly sure where they're going to come down. I will find it fascinating to watch Republicans argue the point that, well, a little bit more taxes isn't going to matter. I mean, to say that's Republican tradition is almost underselling it. That's been Republican religion for years. Is that very notion is not true. So I'm just, it's you guys, your side is going to be going to the euphemism generator time and time again for different ways to describe something that you've been opposed to for years.
When we were kids, we used to play a game called Yes Means No and No Means Yes. and that's exactly where we're going to be on this discussion.
I think Ben is right in that this budget has put Republican lawmakers in a very hard position. I mean, as recently as last year, there were some people taking very tough stances on the Gang of 11 tax plan, which was in many ways very similar to what Governor LePage is trying to do here with the shift of the taxes to the tax burden to sales tax. So it's incumbent upon Paul LePage to go to those Republican lawmakers and say, hey, I know you're going to be going against some statements that you might have made previously. There might be some embarrassing press clippings for the Maine People's Alliance or the Democratic Party to dig up and make you look like a hypocrite. But in the end, this is what I think is best for the state of Maine. I think Governor LePage needs to do that sales job to the Republican lawmakers. I think the Democrats, honestly, I think they're on board with this. I think a lot of them were surprised to see that they got a proposal like this from Governor LePage, and a lot of them, they might be quiet about it, but I think they're going to accept it.
You know, Steve, that's such a great point, because this is what I've heard, and I've heard that when the governor has gone around making his sales pitch to this in smaller groups, that he's done a fantastic job. The people are on board. They get the passion that he's bringing to the table in this. But when his surrogates so far, which are some of the guys that are working in the budget area, have gone out, the reaction hasn't been the same. I mean, I think it really does matter. I think Ben Gilman said on our last show that the governor's out there selling it, and he's the one that's got to do it. I really agree with him on that. Steve Robinson, I want to put you on the spot here. You and I are both MHPC alumnus. We've worked very closely with the organization over the years, and there's two items that Maine Heritage Policy Center has focused on more than any, perhaps. One of them is this idea of the demographic winner, which is the fact that Maine's population is growing older. It's the oldest in the nation, and that's causing a lot of problems. And the other idea is this problem of the economic impact of our imbalance in sales tax to neighboring New Hampshire. So MHPC is still very influential, obviously, in Republican circles and with the governor's office. I mean, how are conservatives or the base conservatives gonna swallow these ideas? And is it as simple as what you've said, that the governor has to kind of take that mantle and lead the charge?
Yeah, I think that the governor definitely needs to lead the charge. He has a position, the bully pulpit, but also as a leader, as a popular leader among conservatives here in the state, at least. Maybe not in the Portland area, but north of Portland, he's very popular, and he needs to use that political capital that he has to sell his budget, and he needs to persuade these people that ultimately it's what's best for Maine. I think we're in a good position because we're debating whether we're going to cut the income tax and not how much our increase in spending is going to be, as we would be under an Angus King or a John Baldacci or a Mike Michaud. I think he's got to convince people that the sales tax, the increase in the sales tax, is worth the decrease in the income tax. I personally think it is. I know MHPC has focused a lot on the sales tax, but I will take an increase in the sales tax over an increase in the income tax any day. And I think it's a worthwhile trade, and Paul LePage needs to make that sale.
So one follow-up for you, Steve, too, and help me understand this, because I'm trying to get my head around it here. How is the governor's team explaining how you simultaneously attract retirees and at the same time attract youth to deal with our demographic winter problem? I mean, have you heard a direct argument about how they're going to balance that? I mean, because to be straightforward, it seems to me that this budget is focused on older people, on retirees, on how retirees deal with their property taxes. And in the governor's speech tonight, he said we need more retirees in Maine. I mean, have you heard a kind of a cogent argument for how that's not going to exacerbate the demographic winter problem?
Well, I think that the demographic winter problem isn't just about we don't want to ban old people from the state or get rid of all the old people. You know, maybe that could fix our demographic problem, but it really doesn't fix the problem. We need to get young people to come here and start families. That's people who are working in middle management for companies like Texas Instruments, who look at coming to Maine, and when they've got the potential job offer, none of them go and say, oh, the sales tax, that's 5.5%, so you know my grocery bill is going to be this much, I'm going to pay this much more in sales tax. No, they're looking at the income tax. They're looking at 6.5%, 7%, 8% coming right out of their paycheck, and that's what's the disincentive for them to move here. So the cut in the income tax, with a long-term view, knowing that that's going to go down and eventually, hopefully, be eliminated completely, that is what's going to attract young people to come here and start families.
Peter Gore, is that what you hear in the business community? I mean, I've heard that a lot, that big companies that are talking about moving their facilities to different states, the income tax is right on the top of that list. I mean, would you concur with that?
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things. I think, though, I mean, I want to take a stab at your question that you just asked, that sort of, how do you, are you exacerbating the drain of the young people and the grayness of the state by attracting older people? The only other word that the governor used more frequently than prosper or prosperity was competitiveness. And the goal of this plan, in addition to bringing prosperity to people, is to make the state more competitive economically. And by making the state more economically competitive, in his eyes, by adjusting the tax rates, businesses will be more interested in coming here, and businesses will be more interested in expanding here. Now, are you ever going to get a Boeing to come to the state of Maine and have a 1,500 person plant? I don't really know about that. But is it possible to get a business here that has 200 or 300 employees, or maybe get a business who has 200 and 300 employees here who have multi-state locations and they want to close Maine down because they don't feel it's competitive? Yeah, it is. And I think the goal of lowering the income tax, restructuring the tax system, and making Maine, appear and very realistically be more competitive overall economically, sort of fits all of those goals and makes both of those things possible.
And let's be real, Lance. The competing strategy here, the competing Democratic strategy to get more young people in the state it's three prongs: give away free stuff, have lots of government jobs, and better concerts in Portland. And that's just not going to cut it.
Ben, is that the case? Is that the Democrat?
I don't think we should let Steve be the one who describes the Democratic particular bias. I think Democrats believe not that, let's take that hypothetical person Steve was talking about that potentially has a job offer here in Maine and maybe somewhere else. I really don't think that person is going to the tax rates to decide what to do. I think it's about quality of life. Are there things... are there good schools? Are there good communities? Are there things that we want to do recreationally? It's about the environment, the outdoors, things like that. That's what attracts people to me. And I don't think we can concede this point that taxes are the be-all, end-all when someone's in that position to make a decision like that.
But isn't it also, aren't those things that you described, aren't those things all bolstered, and don't they thrive more when an economy is thriving? It seems to me that it's not just attracting businesses on the singular point that taxes are there for, but to drive job creation so that everything gets better. We have more tax revenues. We can keep our parks.
This circles back to what I started with. It's about philosophy. LePage used the term job creators a lot during that speech, like a lot of Republicans do. I believe, and I think our side believes, that true job creators are the consumers. And what we want to do is have tax policy that puts money in the pockets of people who are consumers. I don't know where I read this, but 70% of our economy is consumer-based. We need to put money in the pockets of those people. Those are the people that are going to go to businesses, spend money there, and those are the people that, in the end of the day, are going to create the jobs. That's
so at the end of the day. So that's what Paul LePage just said, right? Didn't he say we're going to put money into your pocket in the form of an income tax so you can go out and spend it? You guys agree, right?
No, we don't agree, because he could do a lot better. He's spending a lot of the tax cut on the wealthy, and if you change the balance, you change the mix, you could do better for the middle class.
But a family of four who makes $48,000 a year, who's coming off the tax roll and paying no taxes, that's not wealthy. That's not wealthy. That's a huge.
But those people are
find
those
these
people are
wealthy
going to be
people
paying
to
higher
try.
sales taxes and higher property taxes too. You're only giving one piece of the equation and calling it the whole thing.
Well,
I
but it's
thought
a huge piece of the equation.
Yeah, I thought one of the best parts of the governor's speech tonight was when he outlined the $1,500 pay raise that his plan was going to be for the average Maine family. I mean, I think that so far we haven't seen that kind of real, tangible, simple messaging out of him, and I thought that was great. Ben Grant, I want to go back to you on something that the governor didn't talk much about tonight, but it's part of this budget, the DHHS part of the budget. There's something really interesting happening there. The governor's actually shifting funds in DHHS to nursing homes and to the intellectually disabled, and those two groups are they're waiting list issues right there now. And from what I've heard, kind of on the street, those groups are very happy about where this budget's headed. And I think this has the potential to shear apart what's been kind of a monolithic group of social service agencies in Maine. I mean, is the governor playing politics here, or how is this going to impact the ability of, the Maine Can Do Better coalition and groups like that in getting the message apart and fighting the budget?
Hard to say. I don't know all the details. I don't know where he's getting the money from. If you say it's being shifted around, I don't know.
I'll tell you where it's coming from. We're getting it because we didn't expand Medicaid. These initiatives are available to us because we haven't expanded Medicaid.
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to trust Steve as my source on that, but I will concede that could be a political benefit to the governor, a little divide and conquer among the social service agencies. Certainly could be a side benefit. Whether that's his intent in the beginning, I don't know if I'm willing to be that cynical right now.
Sure.
I would only add on that, Lance, that in hearing the governor speak pre-election, the issues of the waiting list and the nursing home situation were always on the tip of his tongue. So I don't really think it may be convenient in one hand, but I think this is a programmatic commitment that the governor has to these two issues: elimination of the waiting list and bringing financial help to the nursing homes.
Steve Robinson, one final point before we kind of wrap up here. One thing you don't hear very much in this budget discussion that I think we all as conservatives have talked about for a long time is the idea of actually shrinking government. And I don't think, Forbes came out with a very glowing review of this budget this past week, but one thing they did lay out is the fact that it actually does increase, at least in the first 2 years, it does increase revenue to the state. So essentially, I think pure conservatives would say it grows government. Is the shrinking government message dead for conservatives now, and is Paul LePage kind of taking the lead in a different tone of conservative messaging, or what? What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think the message is dead. I think if you look at Paul LePage's first term, he did shrink government in terms of the number of actual state employees, municipal employees. Government employment went down over his first 4 years. I think it's something that he hasn't focused on. He hasn't done a good enough job selling it. And I think for some people, when they get in power, all of a sudden being able to hire new people and take government in their own direction, hire a few new welfare fraud investigators, I think that the allure of growing government can appeal even to conservatives like Paul LePage. It's something I certainly would like to see him shrink government. I mean, if you just look at the size of the state government when Angus King was during his first term compared to now, I mean, the state population hasn't changed, but we've got a lot more government employees. And have government and services improved greatly due to all those new employees? I don't think so. So I would like to see Governor LePage return to that message of actually shrinking government, because that goes hand in hand with cutting spending, and that eliminates the upward pressure that you have to raise taxes.
Ben Grant, your thoughts on that real quickly. I mean, it seemed like, starting maybe in 2010, that the idea that the government was too big was starting to sink in, but you don't hear that. I don't recall hearing that much in the last election cycle, and you don't hear the governor talk a lot about that. I mean, is that an antiquated argument now?
To me, it's kind of a tacit admission that the whole cut government argument may not be the answer. I mean, I have to think he might be scared off by places like Kansas, which went really hard to the cut taxes without replacing the revenue with anything else. And then their state budget is in crisis right now. I wonder if he might have been scared off by places that went really further down the road on that experiment, and that this is a tacit admission
Sam Brown
that doesn't hold water.
Steve, what was that, Steve?
Oh, I was going to say, I don't think Paula Page is going to be citing Sam Brownback anytime soon.
No, definitely not.
Okay, well, to go ahead and wrap up here, what I'd like to do is go around the horn. I'm going to start with you, Peter Gore. I want to hear your final thoughts on this speech tonight, and if you can come up with a letter grade for the governor's performance, let's hear it.
It was the best. It was the best speaking engagement I've seen him deliver. The best speech he's delivered in terms of its delivery. I think he communicated his message clearly. I think he articulated his vision. I think that he appeared that genuinely interested in working across the aisle to achieve the goal that he has. I think his discussion about we have to work together, I ask for your help, I think that's genuine on his part. I think he really wants to make this happen. He realizes it's an uphill fight. I give him a B+.
All right, Ben Grant, what are your final thoughts and letter grade for the speech tonight?
I think I would echo what Peter says about the delivery. It was definitely one of the best delivered speeches I've seen him give. As for the content, probably no surprise I give it a lower grade, probably C-, D+. I just think it's a proposal that's bold, but is just going to generate, I think, too much opposition from so many different corners. I just don't see it's how it has a political future in the legislature.
Steve Robinson, will finish up with you. Letter grade and final thoughts on the speech.
Yeah, I think it was a good speech, something that we didn't get to tonight. His focus on the drug problem in Maine and also domestic violence. I think those are two issues where he could find some bipartisan cooperation in the legislature. Now that there's no campaign or election in the future, I think Democrats will be more willing to work with him and give him a victory on those issues. As I said, I thought it was a good speech. I liked the content of it, so I'm probably more in B+, A- territory. I thought a lot of it is going to depend on follow-through. He's got these town halls coming up, and so I'll be looking to see whether he follows through on it and can do the sales job, both with Democratic lawmakers, Republican lawmakers, and really the people of Maine. Because I think, especially Republican lawmakers, are looking for cover from their constituents to give them the okay to go and support this budget.
Okay, well, thank you guys so much for staying up late here and burning the midnight oil for our final wrap-up here. Tonight's advanced team was Ben Grant, Peter Gore, Steve Robinson. I'm Lance Stutson for the advanced team. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll catch you next time.